Welcome to Research Talk. In our series on qualitative research, we are discussing about different forms of data. In our previous video, we talked about interview data in qualitative research. And today, as you could see on this board, I'm going to talk about observation data. Observation data is another popular form of data used by qualitative researchers. And it's a very important form of data because it really helps you to develop further insight about behaviors, cultural practices, perceptions of people. So observation is a very popular method of collecting data in qualitative research. Now let's talk about what are different forms of observation that a qualitative researchers does. So the first form of qualitative observation is level of engagement. In terms of level of engagement, there are two kinds of observations which are made by a qualitative researcher. The first one is participant observation. So the participant observation refers to when the researcher himself, herself becomes part of the activity, a part of the process of observation being done. So let's say if I am observing students in a classroom, and let's say the students are engaged in some activity being conducted by the teacher. So a participant observation will be, as a researcher, I become part of the activity. So I'm very actively engaged in that process of the observation. So I'm not only observing, I'm also being part of that activity, being part of that natural setting, and actively engaged with my research participants. So I'm doing the activity that my research participants are doing. I am equally participating as other members, research participants are participating. So I'm very actively engaged in that process, and that observation is called participant observation. Now, a level of participation, participant observation could differ. So let's say, take the same example that I'm observing this class, I'm actively participating in this activity and also doing observations. So very highly engaged, you could say, high level of participant observation. But I could also say, like, I will be part of the group activity, but I won't be doing the activity. So I'm part of the, whatever the students are doing, but I'm not actively participating in it, but I'm there. So you could say this is a low level of participant observation where the researcher is participating in the engagement process but not highly active in that process. So depending on the objective of your research, you can determine what might be more suitable. Do you want to be really highly engaged? Maybe engaged but not as highly in that process. So that's briefly about participant observation. You can also do non-participant observation. Now, non-participant observation is, as a researcher, I'm observing these people, my research participant, but I'm not participating in what they are doing, whether they are engaged in an activity or whatever they are doing. I am there, but I'm observing them, but I'm not actively participating in what they are doing. So maybe taking the same example, let's say the classroom example, as a qualitative researcher, I can go and sit in the corner of the room and just observe students what they are doing. So I can do that way. So I can sit in the corner and I'm not engaged. The teacher and the students are doing their work or activity, and I'm writing my observation notes. I'm engaged in my observation. So this is called non-participant observation. Now, from let's now look at from another reference, observation from the point of structure. So from this context of a structure, an observation could be like two ways of observation: structured observation or unstructured observation. What is structured observation? In structured observation, a qualitative researcher already has predefined criteria that he or she wants to observe their research participant on. So let's say if I am doing a study where I'm trying to understand uh, students' behavior, so I might have a predetermined criteria such as during the class, how many times students talk to their talk to the student sitting beside them, how many times student raise their hands when they have a question. So you see, in a structured observation, the researcher already has certain criteria, certain things that he or she wants to count, wants to observe. So you have a predetermined criteria that you want your observation to be focused. So that's structured observation. Unstructured observation is you do not have a predetermined criteria, but obviously you have a focus. You know why, what are the things you are going to observe, but you are also open to notice if something new emerges, or if you notice something which is not part of what you thought you will be observing. So unstructured observation is an observation where uh, you are more open-ended, you are more open, and you may have some predetermined things in mind to observe, but you are also open to observe anything that you see in that class. So that's unstructured observation, no predetermined criteria to be observed. So from a structure point of view, an observation could be maybe somewhere in the middle, let's say semi-structured observation. So you have some structure in terms of what you want to focus on, but you are also unstructured, like, okay, if something new things will come up, I will make a note of those things too as an observer. So that's briefly about from the reference of structure point of view. Now let's talk about the third one, known to participants. So observation can be done in two ways here, covert and overt. So in covert observation, as the name itself suggests, the people who are being observed, they don't know that they are being observed. So it's a covert observation. And generally, a researcher does that if he or she believes that if the people, if the research participants know that they are being observed, it might influence their behavior. It might influence their, how they respond to an activity, how they conduct themselves in that process. And you don't want that as a researcher. So what do? You try to do an covert observation where you observe your participant without telling them that they are being observed, and once the observation is completed, then you inform those people. And in such researches, you have to really think about ethical considerations and make sure your institutional review board approves your request to doing a covert observation for your research. So that's covert observation. Overt is something where participant knows. So if I'm going to observe a classroom, the teacher already tells the participant that we have a guest here, he or she will be sitting in this class and he will be doing some observations. So the students already know in advance that they are expecting somebody to be there and observe them. So from this point of view, known to participant, an observation could be covert or overt. Now finally, from the setting perspective, an observation could be naturalistic or artificial, or sorry, not artificial but experimental. So what is naturalistic observation? When a researcher observes their research participant in their natural setting. So that is naturalistic observation, and most of the observations are in qualitative research are naturalistic observation, where you observe your participants in their natural setting. Experimental observation is when sometimes happens in quantitative studies, where you have your experiment set up, your research participants comes and they are assigned to different groups, and you as a researcher observe them in different experimental conditions. So those conditions are artificially created in a lab or in a setting, and they are not a natural setting of their research participants. So from a setting perspective, an observation could be naturalistic or experimental. So these are a few ways that qualitative researchers use for their observation of their research participants. Remember, observation is a very important tool for a qualitative researcher to collect data that inform whatever they want to explore, such as the behavior, social process, uh, social practices, or any other kind of research that a participant experience that the participant researcher want to explore. So that is briefly about another form of qualitative data, which is observation data. Thank you.